On tonight's programme, a heart attack at 30,000 feet. What saved this woman's life? Australia's biggest mystery, where are the Beaumont children? And could these marks prove that God exists? Hello and welcome to Mysteries. Our first film is about Britain's biggest killer, heart disease. In this country alone, heart disease kills someone every 3 minutes. But what if you were having what you thought was a heart attack and you were miles away from the nearest doctor or hospital with no chance of getting any proper medical help? What would you do? Well, that is exactly the nightmare situation that Rosalind Tighe found herself in.
Angina's from the Greek, which means strangulation. With anxiety, the heart speeds up, the pain gets worse. An angina attack can turn into a heart attack. If somebody's having a heart attack and they're in a situation remote from medical help, the prognosis is not that good.
Before I went to Barbados, my condition was angina and I'd already had one heart attack. Because I'd never been abroad, Alison thought that would be a good idea to take me on holiday. The idea was to go to Barbados. It was marvellous. The holiday went great.
Yeah, I thought that was great, take my mum away on holiday. I thought that'd give her a chance break.
On our last day, we went to the hotel reception, left our luggage at the hotel, and asked them to put it on the lorry which go to the airport.
We were in the airport and my mum just asked if I would go and check to see if our luggage was there.
Mum, you're not going to believe this. They've left the bags at the hotel. What do you mean they left the bags? They never put them on the trolley. They've left them there. No, someone messed up. They're right on the other side of the island. What are we going to do?
Everything was left in mine and my mum's luggage. Passports, money, valuables, just everything that we really needed.
If I travelled more, that wouldn't have been so bad, but because that was my first flight and my first holiday abroad, that was important.
By the time the bags arrived, the other passengers were already boarding the plane. Rosalind and Alison had to be rushed through check-in to join them.
Then we had to climb. It looked like a mountain of stairs. Started to climb them, got to the top. I had to take a couple more sprays.
I can't go any further, Ali. Come on, nearly there. Can I help you? Can you be all right? Can I help at all? Okay.
At the top of the stairs, Rosalind was helped to her seat by the flight attendant.
It wasn't until about 3.5 hours into the actual flight, my mum turned to me and asked if that was getting hot, and she was looking a bit sort of red in the face.
Mum, what's up?
The colour of the passenger is an indication on how serious they are. She wasn't a normal fleshy colour or pale. It was a very distinctive colour, which is grey, which is linked to a severe heart condition.
I think you can bring my mum to a seat with a bit more space. Look, she can't breathe properly.
When I take my spray, it normally works, but this time the spray just didn't do anything.
This is their insurance policy. They know if they get a pain or a tightness in the chest, if they use the spray or the tablets, it will relieve it invariably within 30 to 60 seconds. If that doesn't occur, the alarm bells ring. They'll use the spray again and again. Then the anxiety begins to develop.
All of a sudden, I got all massive pains in my chest, back and down my arm. Couldn't relax. In fact, I was perspiring really bad through the pain.
I felt then that I needed to do something immediately, so I went straight to the flight deck. I informed the captain that we had a middle-aged lady on board the aircraft with a history of a heart condition. The condition was deteriorating and that professional help was needed immediately.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a medical problem and would be very grateful if any medics on board would make themselves known to the cabin crew. Thank you.
When it came over the town, I thought to myself, this must be serious, really serious. I wonder if I could be of some help. And I just looked up the aisle and I couldn't see anybody moving whatsoever. So I made my way up now to the cabin boy.
Excuse me, I'm not a doctor, but I am a qualified nurse. I work in a cardiology unit. Can I...
When she said that she was in cardiology, it was a great relief because I knew she then had some idea of heart conditions and it would be beneficial to the lady in question.
So I went straight up to her and I caught her wrist and I felt a pulse and it was erratic, it was. So I knew that something serious is going on here.
The captain would like to speak to you.
Just fine. And he said then to me, do you feel that we ought to divert? And I said, yes, I think we ought to.
The captain informed me that we were about 45 minutes from the Azores and that we would be diverting into there.
How long before we land?
About 30 minutes.
The pain was terrific, and I sat there and I could see my grandson who we'd lost, and I thought, this is my time. I literally thought I had died.
Rosalind's condition appeared to be deteriorating, and Rose was becoming increasingly worried that she might not survive long enough to land in the Azores.
I was thinking to myself, what on earth can I do now? And a flash went through my mind then, well, you must try the hypnotherapy on this lady.
Rose was convinced hypnosis could help, but she had to have permission before she could try.
Alison, there's a lady on board who is a trained clinical hypnotherapist.
What?
A hypnotherapist?
What are you talking about? I didn't know anything about hypnotherapy, apart from what I'd seen on the Paul McKenna show.
She needs a doctor, not some dodgy quack.
Well, it's up to you.
Oh, I don't believe this.
I then agreed for the woman to go ahead.
Go on then.
I knelt down beside her and I put my arm around her and I said, Roz, listen now, listen to my voice now, Roz.
I'm going to count from 10 to 1. And with each number, you'll feel more and more relaxed.
10,
And all I wanted to do was get to my mum.
9,
I was really stressed, not knowing what was going on with Mum.
and 8.
And deeper.
I remember 10 and 9 and 8, but nothing else.
I said, Roz, I want you to go back now, back to Barbados. You can feel the heat of the sun just coming down on you, and you can hear the sea lashing, and the people there laughing, the children in the background, enjoying every moment of it. And I supported her like that then, until we was landing in the Azores.
After completing my final checks, I went back to Rosalind to make sure that everything was okay. At this point, she seemed to be in a very relaxed state.
When the plane was taxiing, I went up to Roz and I spoke gently to her, and then I counted them from 1 up to 5.
4, 5.
The next thing I can remember was this number 5 just hangs in the air in front of me all the while, and I can't honestly remember why a number 5 should be in the air. And apparently that is the number she got me out of the hypnosis.
We landed into the Azores, and when we pulled up, we could see lots of flashing lights outside, so it was a great relief as well, knowing that the professionals were on hand to help Rosalind.
Rosalind was kept in hospital in the Azores for 3 days before being flown home. But the severity of her symptoms led some experts to believe that the attack could have been more than angina.
From the story of the symptoms and the way they presented, I believe she was having a heart attack. The most important way of relieving someone of a heart attack is to get them to medical treatment quickly, to get them onto therapy to try and open the blocked artery. Hypnosis can't do that.
But some experts do believe that hypnotherapy could have played a part in Rosalind's recovery.
The effect of that hypnotherapy would be to slow Rosalind's heart rate, to slow her breathing, all of which would have been extremely beneficial for her. Without the intervention by Rose, who knows what that could have led to. So, did Rose save Rosalind's life? maybe she did.
She definitely did save my life. There's no doubt in my mind.
While the experts remain divided over whether or not the hypnotherapy did work, Rosalind and Rose are in no doubt.
Some people do think I've done something special on the plane, but for me, I've done something that is come natural, because these complementary therapies, like the hypnotherapy, play a big part. I only wish that modern medicine can see that it has got a role to play.
If I thank you every second of the day, that will never pay for what she done for me. Never, ever.
Our next story was to lead two men on a 30-year quest to solve Australia's biggest mystery. Yet today, it's still no nearer a conclusion than it was then. It all began on January the 26th, 1966, a date that should have been remembered for the wonderful celebrations of Independence Day. But instead, many see it as the day Australia lost its innocence.
G'day, Keith. Have you seen my kids?
Sorry, not since I dropped them at the beach this morning, Mrs. Bowman.
Okay, mate. Thanks.
No worries.
At first, Nancy Beaumont thought her three children had missed the bus when they didn't return home from the beach. After their father Jim couldn't find them, they called the police. Since then, there has been theory and counter-theory about what happened to the children. Detective Stan Swain was running the investigation.
The extent of the search was certainly unprecedented in this state. And despite incredibly detailed searches, nothing at all was found. 3 children literally disappeared off the face of the earth. It escalated to a national event. The media went into a state of frenzy.
So far, police have no clues as to what has exactly happened to the Beaumont children, but throughout the city, the search goes on. I have here Detective Sergeant Swain. Would you please tell us the latest?
Well, there's nothing new to report at this stage, but you can rest assured that we will be leaving no stone unturned.
Channel 9's anchorman Kevin Crease was one of the first reporters on the scene.
It's said that children go missing every year, so why all the excitement about this? 3 children at a time don't go missing every year. Brothers and sisters don't go missing every year. Nothing like it had ever happened before, and nothing like it has ever happened since. You could feel an atmosphere of hysteria taking over the whole of the city of Adelaide. The whole of the state of South Australia was turned over. Holes were dug, buildings were knocked down, rivers were searched, lakes were drained. Just thinking, we will find them, we will find them, there's no doubt about that. We never have. The police were being swamped. They were getting hundreds of reports a day on where the children might be, where people were sure they'd been seen.
What time was it that you saw the children?
Well, I've certainly never known anything like this in my police career. You get 3 children who simply appear to have vanished into thin air. And I resolved that if I possibly could, I would solve it.
Swain.
The first thing that had to be ruled out was whether these children drowned. Bearing in mind there was no clothing found, and there was an incredibly detailed search. That's been well and truly ruled out.
Glenelg is a very safe beach, shallow water and the rest of it. Anyone in trouble would have been spotted. If they hadn't been spotted, if they had drowned, the bodies would have been found in a very short time, and searches were made all along the coast in the remote possibility that that had happened.
Early in the inquiry, it was presumed they'd been murdered. And we can understand one child being murdered, but for 3 children just to be taken away and then murdered without anybody notice anything, it just seems so incredible.
I don't go along with the murder theory because in crimes of that type, the bodies are usually in very shallow graves. It was a very, very hot summer here. and the graves would have become apparent in a very short time.
Detective Swain tried to piece together what the children had done that day. He began with their parents.
Now, Mrs. Beaumont, first thing we have to establish is what happened the morning the children disappeared.
There was nothing unusual. I just packed the kids off to the beach like I've done many times before.
Around about 10 a.m, Nancy Beaumont gave the children a little bit of money, put them on a bus and sent them to the beach. We know that they got to the beach because the driver confirmed that. A lady at the beach said that she saw some children answering the description, cooling themselves under a sprinkler a little later in the day. We know that the children went to a cake shop near the beach because somebody in the shop recognised them as the Beaumont children.
What can I get you?
The children bought some food with a £1 note. This was a significant point because Nancy Beaumont had given them less than £1. And of course, where the £1 came from, this is one of the mysteries. And after that, they just simply disappeared.
The next break in the inquiry seemed to come when a witness remembered having seen a man watching the children.
It was from her description of this man that a drawing was made and he became the suspect. I think that's where the case started to get offline, because this person may not have been there in the first place. The sketch didn't lead to any proof that this man either existed or had anything to do with it.
But although Stan was not convinced by the sighting, other people were.
Hello, Kevin Crease, Channel 9 News.
There were thousands of tip-offs coming in every week. 99.99% of course were totally unreliable. I received one which I, to this day, think was reliable.
Along Highway number 1, near Mount Barker.
A woman said she had seen the children and that they were staying at a house near where she had seen them.
I'm coming down with my cameraman, don't go anywhere.
I asked my superiors to stake out this house, but they thought I was becoming a bit overexcited and said, no, we'll notify the police of what you've been told. I was then informed that a uniformed policeman had been sent to the house. He'd been assured the children weren't there. But of all the hundreds and hundreds of leads and tip-offs that have come, that, I believe, was the strongest. To this day, I just feel the children had been there, were alive, and are probably alive today.
The latest development in the missing Beaumont children story, an elderly...
When no one seemed to be getting closer to finding the children, a local businessman brought in a Dutch clairvoyant to help.
Mr. Croyset worked with the police in many parts of the world, and he was successful in most of the cases, and he was the best man to bring out to Australia.
Croisette was taken to the beach to see what he could find.
Mr. Croisset had a vision with a man in it, but later on that man disappeared.
So Mr. Croisset does not believe the children left with foul play?
No, according to Mr. Croisset, no. What he knows of it, no, definitely not.
The clairvoyant claimed the children had fallen into a hole, and later a warehouse was built on top. But they were only allowed to excavate a small site until last year.
Excavation work began at the Somerton Park factory last month. Adelaide businessman Con Polites determined to more thoroughly investigate a vision by Dutch clairvoyant Gerard Croisset.
We dug down as far as we could. There were dogs brought in, and we had a lot of scientists, and we still didn't find the children.
Con Polites remains convinced the children's bodies are still under the factory.
They could be somewhere under that floor of the warehouse. They can't vanish off the earth. But if they're not there, I hope that they're alive, and they will, and they're somewhere else.
More than 30 years after they disappeared, Australia still hopes to find the answer, and no one more so than Detective Swain.
The case remains as big a mystery as it was on that very day.
But he remains convinced they are still alive.
I believe they were handed over to somebody, either taken away by a cult or handed over to a cult. There was a cult around at the time who were in fact breaking families up. I believe that these children could be and may well be alive today.
Today, the case is headed by Detective Brian Swan.
Even today, we receive calls regarding the disappearance of the Beaumont children. On average, about 3 or 4 a month since 1988. Clairvoyants, soothsayers, crystal ball gazers, dreamers, and people genuinely believe they have good information. And it's been 32 years now, and the bodies haven't been found. Given that fact, the case remains open. I don't believe myself they are alive. I could be wrong.
Today we know a vast amount about the human mind and body. We have medical treatments that just a short while ago would have seemed inconceivable. But there is one condition which was first recorded more than 700 years ago, about which we know little more today than was known then. To those who suffer from it, it's a frightening affliction, and yet to millions of others, it's seen as irrefutable proof that God exists. It's called stigmata. Stigmata are marks resembling the wounds Christ is supposed to have suffered during his crucifixion. It's claimed that these marks can even bleed. St. Francis of Assisi was the first recorded case of stigmata in 1224. Wounds spontaneously appeared, which looked as though nails had been forced through his flesh. Ever since, experts have been mystified about exactly what's going on.
Stigmata definitely exists, there's no doubt about it. The question is what actually causes the stigmata. And often people have thought that maybe they're inducing it themselves, they're putting the wounds into themselves. And certainly it would appear that that isn't the case. Maybe it is with 1 or 2 people, but normally there are some other mechanisms going on to actually cause these wounds.
More than 300 cases of stigmata have been diagnosed since St. Francis of Assisi. Today, 25 people around the world cope with the condition. 10 years ago, stigmata appeared in George Hamilton's hands, feet and head.
The blood was coming. I thought I had a nosebleed. I wasn't shocked. I'd bemused.
George's condition was diagnosed by Dr. John Spence.
In April 1987, George presented to me sores on the palmar surface and the backs of both hands. These were bleeding at the time, but it clicked with me that this was something different, this was something unusual, that they presented as something that I had not come across before, but recognised them as the signs of the cross known as stigmata.
I used to bleed every Easter. Now it's spread itself over the year. I believe it comes from God. I'm nothing special. Why he gave me that, I don't know.
This was something he didn't want, he still doesn't want. It has changed his life completely.
I love my normal life back. Simple as that. I love it back.
But for the Catholic Church, the reasons why George has suffered stigmata are clear.
The Church, as well as recognising the fact of stigmata, does to recognise that they can be God-given. God would set a seal, as it were, and give a visible mark to a person whose life reflected that of Christ himself, that it was a fully and virtuous Christian life.
Independent experts do agree with the Catholic Church on 2 issues. Firstly, that the stigmata are real, the condition does exist. And secondly, that 99% of all sufferers have been Catholic. What they cannot agree on is what causes stigmata in the first place. For scientists, the answer lies within our own bodies.
The power of the mind really cannot be underestimated. We know that the mind can cause physical illnesses like heart attacks, ulcers. They certainly can make all of those worse. We also know that the mind can alter us physically. For instance, somebody who had been a prisoner tied up with ropes, when they started talking about this afterwards in a very emotional state, the wounds of the ropes actually appeared on their wrists. Now this again is the body changing as a result of psychological mechanisms. It's only one small step to go on to say that the mind actually can alter our physical state and cause the stigmata.
For some scientists, God is not on the agenda at all, and therefore their own decisions or opinions may be somewhat narrow as far as the church is concerned. We do respect the scientific evidence, but within the context of divine providence.
If one sees this just as God working through psychological mechanisms, that's like saying the cure for any illness is a direct intervention of God. Well, yes, maybe God is involved in modern medicine, but it's not what people normally understand as a miracle.
But whatever does lie behind these wounds, skeptics could argue that it's in the Church's interest for stigmata to be considered the work of God.
Mysteries are really the currency of belief. And I think the Catholic Church is looking for miracles, it's looking for divine intervention. And so it fans encouragement to look for that kind of thing. And in stigmata, they're finding it.
The Catholic Church certainly does not maintain miracles to maintain its following, because the Church itself has a very long drawn-out procedure to investigate alleged miracles, and it's a purely gratuitous assertion on the part of this person.
While the Church and scientists continue to argue, if ever proof were needed about the mysterious nature of the condition, it comes in one painful fact. We don't know the cause of stigmata, so we have no way of curing it, which means that for people like George, the suffering continues. That's all for this week. On our next programme,
someone call 911!
The toddler who should be dead. What saved his life that day?
I knew in my mind that child was dead, that my son was dead. There was no way he had survived.
Why does the 100-year-old wreck of the ship Mohegan still cause panic? And what killed 140 men in their sleep without explanation? Until then, from Mysteries, goodbye.
A simple shopping trip holds a few surprises for the trotters. Next tonight on BBC One, Only Fools and Horses.
Extreme situations.
Crash phase. State one.
Extreme locations.
I've never seen anything like it. We just shot away. The depth gauge was just spinning around.
Extraordinary people.
There were bits of cars everywhere, nose cones, wheels, bits of suspension.
A new series explores critical decisions and life-saving actions made at the limits of human endeavour. In Extreme Danger, Friday, 8:30, BBC One.
Which show has got all the sporting action?
I was going to say, have some of this, big boy.
Not quite, Ali. How about Question of Sport?
Good answer. How did you get that?
Well, the sporting celebrities are a dead giveaway.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. Question of Sport, tomorrow at 7 on BBC One.
The new issue of the Radio Times includes features on forthcoming BBC programmes, together with complete listings for all television and major satellite channels. If you thought Al Dente was a film star, then Delia Smith requires your company on BBC Two now. Everything you've ever wanted to know about pasta. This is BBC One, and it's going to be a long night for the trotters.